During data entry, when you're entering or editing data, the information you add or the changes you make aren't saved immediately. Instead, you can keep the record in an unsaved state until you take an action that will cause the record to be stored. The act of saving a record is called committing the record, and it happens automatically when you exit the record, for example by clicking the mouse in a blank area of the layout. When you do that, the cursor is no longer in any of the fields of the current record and the record is committed. Its current contents are saved to disk. So for example, if I click into the middle name field on the Contemporary Japan and Popular Culture publication record, then if I click in a blank area over at the right, the cursor leaves the field and I've exited the record. Another way you can exit a record, and therefore commit any unsaved changes, is by pressing the Enter key on the numeric keypad. So I'll click into the field again, and now I'll press the Enter key, and you can see that I've exited the record. And there's also a script and button command to commit the current record or find request. One of the important things about this process is that before a record you're editing is committed, you have the option to discard the changes and go back to the last saved version of the record. That's a procedure known as revert, and while the record is being edited, the revert command is available on the Records menu. After you commit the record, the edits become permanent. They're written to the disk and it's no longer possible to revert the record. So for example, if I add John Treat's middle initial to the middle name field, which happens to be W for Whittier, before I commit the change, the Records menu has the Revert Record command. So let's try that. We're prompted with a dialog asking whether we want to revert all changes to this record since it was last entered. And if I click the button to revert the record, the cursor leaves the field, so I've exited the record and the change is no longer visible. However, if I decline to revert the record and instead press the Enter key, the change I made is now saved to the database and can't be reverted. So you can see now that the Revert Record command, after the record has been committed, is no longer available. Another important thing about the concept of committing a record is that until you commit a record, it's locked. So if other users are accessing the file over the network, for example, they won't be able to edit the record while you're editing it. But after you commit the record, your changes will propagate to other users' screens and the record will become available for someone else to begin editing it. While anyone is editing a record, the record is said to be locked until it's committed, with the significance of the lock being that other users of the system are prevented from editing the record. It's a simple system that avoids the confusion that would result if multiple people were making changes to the same record at the same time. In fact, in a similar way, you can also lock yourself out of a record if you have multiple windows open on the screen. A record can only be edited in one window at a time. Let's take a look at that. I'll open a new window of the work file. So now we have two windows, both showing the publication's layout. Let's say I go into the middle name field on the Contemporary Japan and Popular Culture record and add the rest of John Treat's middle name. Now, leaving the cursor in the field, if I click on the second window to bring it to the front, you can see that the changes haven't propagated to the copy of the record showing in this second window. And if I try to click into the field and make a change, an error dialog appears saying I can't modify the record in this window because it's being modified in another window. So to make a change in this window, I'd need to go back to the first window, commit the record, which I'll do by pressing the Enter key. Now you can see that the change has been propagated to the second window, and I can start making changes here without receiving an error message. Now if I commit the change I've made in this second window, it's propagated to the first window. So editing in one window at a time and a requirement to commit changes before editing the same record in a different window.